Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here with my colleague.
Joe Rayo, the first Joe and Joe show, either on Facebook or on YouTube in 11 days.
And we're
Joe.
doing it on, we're going to do it on YouTube tonight. Welcome aboard, everybody. Thanks for being here, as always. We've got a really interesting night going on here with all this activity. We're usually focused on Atlantic tropics, but they've been quiet. And the Pacific has been relatively busy. You just said you did the count. This is the 12th storm.
12.
But this one, Hurricane Lane, is if the last recon that I just looked at is correct, and I'm sure it is, it's probably a Category 5 hurricane at this moment, and which is amazing.
It is absolutely amazing. You just simply do not get, from the climatological point of view, in this particular part of the world, even at this time of the year, at least for the Atlantic Basin, we're now into or approaching the peak of the hurricane season. I would suppose it's probably the same in the Pacific, but the Pacific is so much different because it's larger,
Right.
and there are areas, and the region around Hawaii, usually the waters are rather coolish and preclude something like this from happening. But
Well, at least right around the islands,
Right.
anyway. And then
Right.
they always have these, there's always some kind of upper low out there creating all sorts of wind shear.
Yeah.
So we've been saying how Hawaii is relatively shielded from a lot of the action that goes on with respect to these tropical storms. They've had very, very few direct landfalls. The last one was Iniki in 1992. And I found out today the island of Maui has never actually seen a hurricane make landfall. But look at this. I mean, it's really starting to look like a buzzsaw here.
Right.
It's got that signature on the satellite, and the eye has really tightened up. And it's done this, Joe, right as the Hurricane Hunter plane is there observing all this. It's made its third pass, and I've got the recon. I'm going to pull it up. 936 millibars. It dropped 6 millibars in the last 2 hours while the plane has been going through it.
This is unbelievable. Again, you don't see this. And when we had the hurricane a couple of weeks ago,
Hector.
I said to myself, well, there you go. That's something unusual. We probably won't see that for a while again. So it kept just past south.
Just like last year on the Atlantic Basin,
Right.
with Irma.
Exactly, precisely. And this one, unlike 2 weeks ago, it does not appear. It's looking more and more like this one is not going to take a trek just to the south. This one is showing signs of possibly taking a curve to the north and west, right up toward those lovely tropical islands.
Well, we'll go to the Hurricane Center. This is off the 5 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center, and this is their forecast. And by the way, I think this is probably a good time to mention a couple of things. First off, welcome to those of you who are watching from the Hawaiian Islands. The few of you have been on board in the last couple of days. Second thing is, these maps that you see, any of the weather models that we show you, those are not maps that you're to use if it comes to where you have to make decisions. Please be sure to contact. This is the official National Hurricane Center's forecast. This is certainly something that you can look at and consider, but please consult your local officials regarding decisions that you may need to make in the next couple of days if Lane winds up making that very close pass to the Hawaiian Islands.
Now I have a question, and I should really know this, shouldn't I? But you've been saying National Hurricane Center. Now, is this
This is this is the Central Pacific Hurricane Center.
Okay, but do you think the guys over in Miami at Coral Gables have a hand in suggesting or making comments to
I'm not sure of. I don't know. I imagine they probably all get on a coordinated call. They have to. I'm sure they do that
because the Central Pacific Hurricane Center is really the Weather Service office that provides the forecast for the Hawaiian Islands on a daily basis, just like our weather service in Upton.
So they're doing double duty.
Though they're really doing double duty now. Now all of a sudden they have to worry about this, whereas the National Hurricane Center in Florida only preps for one thing, hurricanes. So I'm sure that the phone lines have been burning between Hawaii and Florida as the experts out there are talking, going back and forth, and trying to make a determination of how and where this thing is going to go.
Right. The pinkish areas, those are the islands under a hurricane watch, which includes it's Hawaii and Maui counties. Honolulu's in there. Hilo. The official forecast track continues to show that bending to the right. And the other thing that's changed, Joe, is that they're holding on to major hurricane strength longer and longer, and this is one of the things that we've discussed here over many times, is the fact that the intensity forecasts are difficult, and the Hurricane Center has admitted that not maybe admitted is not the right word, but they've certainly stated openly that the intensity part of the forecast is something that they have a much rougher time with. This is the latest. This is the hurricane passes that have been made, and there are going to be more frequent fixes here. But where the plane icon is, that it's pointing, so it looks like they I don't know, they may make a fourth pass through this. But look at the pressures, Joe, in this current run of the last couple of hours. 942 millibars on the first pass, 942 millibars on the second pass. This is only over a span of about 2 hours. 936 millibars. So the pressure has suddenly dropped about 6 millibars in the time that it took the hurricane hunters to go through the center the second time and then just fly down and then around. I'm trying to work this backwards here to see how they did this, because they're right here now.
Looks like a double bow tie.
Yeah. So, the first pass is that 942. That's to the right. Then, and by the way, if you look, the scale of winds here on the bottom, that I guess that's a brownish orange. As if some of those wind barbs in there. That's over 137 knots. And then it went down, up, and around. So it comes in from the northeast on the second pass, and then down, across, and then back up from the southeast on the third pass. And of course, by this thing's moving along,
right?
So it went from 942, 936, and now they've gone up in the northwest semicircle, coming back down, and it looks like they're about to make a fourth pass into this thing.
I'm wondering whether or not the time frame. Remember now, Hawaii is 6 hours behind us here in the New York or the eastern United States. So it's high noon for the most part out there. And I'm wondering whether or not any diurnal factor comes into play.
Could be.
That's the warmest. Well, not the warm. It's not yet the warmest part of the day. The sun is at its highest point. It will be the warmest time of the day in a few hours, and of course that could loan itself to a lot more in the way of convection.
And you have these eye wall replacement cycles that happen in these intense hurricanes, where the eye wall reaches a peak strength, it begins to decay, and then a new eye forms from the inside, and then the old eye just collapses.
Right.
And usually you get fluctuations in intensity, but we seem to be going into some sort of deepening phase here. Maybe one last burst of intensification before it makes the turn. I don't know. This is a huge learning experience for both of us, because we just don't see this kind of thing.
Well, for you and I, and for even the hurricane forecasters, because climatologically speaking, what we're looking at right now is exceedingly rare. This is something that you don't see every day. And if you try to make your forecast based upon climatological records from other storms, I don't recall ever seeing a storm of this magnitude, this strength. And you just brought up the spaghetti plots,
right? And
it shows that the vast majority of all the models are pretty much taking it on that turn to the northwest and bringing it into. Well, actually, it doesn't bring it in. It brings it much closer to the islands, obviously, than the hurricane we had 2 weeks ago.
This run shifts north. By the way, this is a good time to mention two other things. These maps are all courtesy of the hard work that Levi Cowan does on tropicaltidbits.com, and he's got a notation on there: do not use this map to make decisions. See official information from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center. These models a whole bunch of them. You can see how there's so much variation. After about 24, 36 hours, some of them go to the right, some of them go a little bit to the left. The vast majority of them, even the ones that are going to the left, still make a close enough pass where I think there's probably going to be some land impacts for the Hawaiian island chain, even though it makes that bend, eventually makes that bend back to the left.
Well, the worst possible thing could be, and I'm looking at this spaghetti plot, and that's what not out of the question could happen, where it doesn't make landfall, but the eye of the storm remains just offshore from the Big Island, from
Right.
Maui, from Oahu, in a sense that, and they could be on the worst part of the storm, the northeast quadrant, getting the highest, or strongest winds on a more consistent or constant basis, with no chance of, let's say, the eye passing over and giving you a little bit of a break. This really looks like bad news for our 50th state.
Well,
right now.
the big variable is going to be, there's a couple of things. You've got the high terrain of Hawaii, which will probably disrupt the circulation to some degree.
Right.
The big key is going to be wind shear, which is evident on the satellite loop. I'm going to try and bring up the wider satellite loops so we can see what we're talking about with respect to wind shear. Let me run through the rest of this. So this is the GFS ensembles, and you can see all these members are all over the place. If you're not if you're a forecaster, if you're a forecaster trying to figure this out, you're basically kind of tearing your hair out at this point because of so many possibilities. You don't have a lot of climatology to look at. It's not like
Right.
It's not like Florida where you have a huge library of storms over the last 100 or so years that you could look at, or
Right.
Texas or
Right.
Louisiana, or even up for us where we are here in the Northeast. The number of storms that have impacted Hawaii are very few and very far between, and landfalls are very, very rare. So, you and I can fall back on the experiences that we've had with some of the hurricanes that have come up the East Coast.
Right.
This is all new, and this is a very, this really, I think the ensembles, the GFS ensembles, really kind of exemplify the dilemma here that the forecasters have. The dark line, by the way, is the average of all those different plots that you see.
Right, absolutely. And words just fail me from looking at this. And the first image that you showed, the first map.
The spaghetti plot?
No, the one prior to that, the one that the standard static view of the path of the storm.
This one.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that especially toward the middle and latter part of the track, that cone is not a little bit wider. It still seems relatively small.
They're going by consensus with how they come up with. They've been just basically splitting the difference with all the models, and
Right.
I could kind of sympathize with that as a forecaster, because what are you supposed to do with this?
Right.
Obviously the track that's the furthest to the left would have hardly any impact at all.
Right.
And then, of course, you've got the ones that are the furthest to the right that take it and cut it right across the Big Island, or the western part of the Big Island.
Right.
And this has got to be very, very difficult. And by the way, here's the other, the dilemma with respect to intensity is the fact that all the intensity models are showing this to weaken from where we are at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, all the intensity models, most of the intensity models have been showing weakening for the last 2 days. So that hasn't worked. But if you want to take this out between 72 and 96 hours, and this could be because of the increasing wind shear issue, you do have it down to a minimal hurricane, and then some of the models actually weaken it pretty rapidly after that as we go through time. But again, without having that sort of bank of climatology to look at, I don't know.
Well, people here in the tri-state area always have been referring to Sandy as Superstorm Sandy.
Right.
Superstorm Sandy was, by the standards of most hurricanes, barely a Category 1 when it made landfall. Maybe fell just below the criteria of a Category 1 storm. The only reason that Sandy was so devastating was it took a path that was abnormal compared to all the other hurricanes.
And by the time it got up here, you had that big upper low. I mean, it became, this sort of monstrous extratropical storm.
Correct. But we were getting, devastating floods and tide effects on Long Island that we don't normally see
Right.
from other storms because the storm was taking that unusual track. I'm not too familiar with the situation regarding Hawaii, but one thing is very obvious, that regardless of whether it makes landfall or not, it's likely to come close enough to cause major effects like beach erosion, coastal erosion, heavy surf, and who's to say that there will be places on the Big Island or all the other islands that may very well see devastating effects even without a direct hit.
I just brought up the wider satellite view so we could take a look at what I think is the key to this forecast with respect to intensity, Joe. If you look at the clouds, if you go west of the Hawaiian Islands, actually looking southwest of the Hawaiian Islands, you see how the higher clouds seem to be blowing from southwest to northeast. That is evidence of some strong of some strong shear. But I'm just looking at this picture right now. And compared it to yesterday, the area of the zone of that shear seems to have shifted a little bit further to the west. That shear needs to materialize in order to take this storm down at least a couple of notches in terms of intensity.
Agreed.
And if it winds up that the shear area, the shear is delayed, or if the shear for some reason relaxes because the upper low that's producing that migrates a bit to the west, which is always possible, then you could have a real serious issue on your hands. And I know we're openly speculating here. We're kind of thinking out loud, and I'm guessing that forecasters that are dealing with this on a direct basis are also sort of speculating and thinking out loud. Well, what if the shear relaxes and this moves up? Then it won't weaken as quickly, or it might even hold its own for a while longer.
Well, the worst thing is to deal in hypotheticals, because sometimes the hypotheticals lead you down a path which could cause calamity, especially in the mainstream media's point of view, and informing. If you think about it, Hawaiians are probably saying, "Look at what we've gone through so far this year: a fake bomb alert, and now we had not one but two Category 4 or 5 storms passing by just to our south." Who said that this was paradise all of a sudden?
I know.
The other question, the satellite view that you just showed, that's the old GOES, or the GOES that's over the western U.S. or the Pacific Ocean. This is not the new GOES 16.
Correct.
Which probably would provide us with even more data, but unfortunately...
It doesn't go out that far,
right.
So they're still way there. I think there's a GOES 17 that's going up to take care of the Pacific.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the GFS. This is, the GFS, for all the criticism that the GFS gets, it was among the first models to show this right hook turn.
Right.
And the run that we're seeing here, by the way, is the 12Z run. So we'll put this up, and then we'll look at the 18Z run. But it took it just right over the Big Island. But looking at the pressure, the number on the pressure is not important so much as the changes. But here it is, almost right on top of the Big Island, and it's a hurricane. And then within about 24 hours, it weakens very, very rapidly. And I think that is part of the whole thing with the shear, the interaction of the island with the island, and then the low-level circulation weakens so much that it starts to respond to the trade winds, and it starts moving back to the west again.
Right.
So very, very tough. This hook is going to start, this right hook, Joe, is going to start very soon, probably tomorrow morning, to make that turn. So we're gonna know pretty much in another 12 to 18 hours whether this is going to be a serious impact for Hawaii or not.
And look at that huge subtropical high that's located to the north of the islands, and that's not unusual because especially in the month of July. Now we're moving toward the end of August, but July is the month where, if you were to choose a vacation to go to the Hawaiian Islands, that is the month that has a 95% probability on the lee side of the islands from these volcanic cones, where you tend to get the clearest weather because the winds, the northeast trade winds, go first up the island, orographic lifting, and then they come sharply down. And during July, especially, and I think part of August too, you get that because, again, of the location of that big subtropical high. But the subtropical high has also this year been working overtime to try to suppress these tropical cyclones. It did a good job 2 weeks ago, but it looks like it may not do such a good job this time around with this one.
The upper ridge to the north has really been key, and I'm going to bring up the North Pacific. A lot of geography to look at here, but we've been talking the last few days. It's the upper high that builds toward the Gulf of Alaska, and there's a lot of space between where that upper high is, where the strongest part of that ridge is, well north of 30 degrees north. So there's basically a weakness that this hurricane is responding to,
right.
and these hurricanes like to gain latitude,
right.
unless there's something to force it on a straight west course. The steering currents, at least by what the GFS is showing, not enough to push it westward, so it responds to that weakness.
Now you see that upper low there. We don't usually see an upper low in that position. In fact, the upper high...
The one that's to the northeast of the hurricane.
Right.
Yes.
The upper high is usually where that upper low is.
Yes.
So that's kind of a very unusual situation. Now, I don't know if it's the same thing. Some of our viewers may remember, who have an astronomy interest, that in 1991 there was a total eclipse of the sun that passed right over the big island of Hawaii. Everybody headed for the big island because climatology said that was going to be the best place to see that eclipse because of fair weather, clear weather. But on the day of the eclipse, they had some sort of an upper low over the islands, and they had a name for that. They called it a TUT, a tropical upper tropospheric trough. And the chief meteorologist, I had some conversations with him when I was in Honolulu, and he told me, he said, this doesn't usually happen. We rarely ever see this. So I'm sure that this is another one of those situations where we rarely ever see that a low pressure system in the position it is now.
Right.
And as you just pointed out, it's playing a big factor in where lane is going to go because
right.
it's creating that weakness. The upper high is displaced now more to the north and northwest of its usual position.
Exactly.
And you got that weakness, and so the hurricane is saying, hey, I can move a little further to the north and northwest. So.
And that's been really the key to all of this, is the strength of that ridge, where the European model, which has been further south, was stronger. Even the European last night, and to a lesser extent today, but last night really kind of shifted to the northeast with its track too. So meanwhile, the recon has made its full turn, and it looks like the plane is about to make a fourth pass into Hurricane Lane, but it's not quite there yet. I just want to give another look on this satellite loop. I mean, look at that eye, Joe. It's just real. I mean,
it's shrinking.
It's shrinking. I mean, this is really looking like a buzzsaw. I'd be shocked if they don't find this is a Cat 5. Certainly, with the pressure fall, you got to think that there might be a Cat 5 here.
Let's use the analogy of the ice skater. As he or she spins around real fast, the faster it goes, or whatever, the tighter the circle, so to speak. And as this thing is winding up like the proverbial buzzsaw, like you just said, that eye actually begins to shrink. And in the hours to come, it'll be interesting to see if we have that cycle of the eye reforming or changing in appearance.
All right, I want to go to the 18Z. We got the 18Z GFS, so we have a new model run to take a look at. And let's just back it up here. But it looks like it's doing about the same thing. Taking it, almost right over the Big Island. Then then the center just bounces and weakens and starts to move west. As that low level, as this system weakens, if it weakens that quickly, and I've seen them weaken around Hawaii like this, but it weakens that quickly, and you're left with just a low level swirl. It is going to respond to the trade winds, the winds at the lower levels of the atmosphere, and you'll suddenly see this push back to the west, but. I got to think that you're going to wind up with some very heavy rains out of this, especially on the Big Island,
right.
Where we've got the volcano going and all the rest of it.
Well, there are two major astronomical observatories. There's the observatory at Mauna Kea on the top of the dormant volcanic cone in Hawaii. There's also Haleakea, another volcanic cone, another observatory there. And I'm wondering whether or not there are going to be any individuals who are going to ride this out on those two observatories. Mauna Kea is 13,800 feet above sea level. And you got to wonder what the scale of the winds are going to be, even if the storm does weaken.
Yeah.
What kind of winds are going to be experienced
Oh,
up there?
they're gonna be pretty insane.
Yeah.
All right, so let's come home. We've got things going on here that you and I I was looking at this last week, really hoping and praying as I kept watching models go back and forth with the idea of the big plunge of cool air and humidity, and then it was there, it was not there, it was there to a lesser extent, and then we started to see that trend for lower, a good shot of cool Canadian air. It looks like it's happening, but first off, though, we do have this kind of warm front, cold front combination that's going on, and it is producing some showers and storms across Pennsylvania this evening. In fact, even before we do that, let me just show the radar. This is the radar, the wide radar view. As of we're coming up on 6:30 Eastern time, folks. So if you're watching this on a replay, it's dated, obviously, and you're going to want to check your local National Weather Service office for the latest radar and latest watches and warnings that may be up for your area.
Now, the warm front, normally, the books on meteorology tell you that the warm front is associated with usually a long, slow period of light rain, not
for the more convective stuff.
Not convective stuff, but
Right.
it looks like this warm front is going to be accompanied by the showers and storms you see in central Pennsylvania, I believe, is associated with that warm front that is...
Well, you know what? I didn't give a good look at the surface plot, but the warm front may have, maybe some of it is already pushed up into northern West Virginia. We'll have to pull up a temperature plot to see for sure, but perhaps the warm front is kind of snaking its way, up across southern Pennsylvania and then coming back down into Virginia.
And you see that narrow line here. I think that looks like the cold front. Actually, there are two lines that are beginning to take form or whatever.
But there was a severe thunderstorm watch up for parts of the south central and southwestern PA. Some of those storms looks like they've passed peak, but these showers are all going to move to the northeast. So much of the northeast will see some of the shower activity during the overnight. Then we'll get a shower or thunderstorm or whatever we get on Wednesday with some humidity. And then after that, I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm going to bring the dew point map up because then we can celebrate.
Well, I don't think I stuck my head too far out on my forecast tonight for the lower Hudson Valley. For Thursday and for Friday, in my bullet box, I said, you can quote me on this, because we have had some shots of nice weather, especially during July. That seems like 1,000 years ago. Some of the nicest weather we have seen so far this summer on the way for Thursday and Friday. I said yesterday that I voted or nominated Friday as the pick of the week, but now what I'm saying is just take your pick, because either one of those days, Thursday or Friday, look to be really spectacular.
Right.
And it's been a long time, but I think you're absolutely right. I think we finally are going to get some nice weather.
Well, here are your dew points by Thursday morning. You've got 50s and then into the 40s during the day on Thursday, and those low dew points go all the way down. Even some humidity relief in parts of Georgia, northern Alabama, Mississippi. That's a 51 dew point that's sprinting out in northern Alabama. That's pretty far south for this time of year.
51 dew point in August.
Yeah,
in
that's,
Alabama.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
But
here's Friday morning. Still got dew points in the 40s and 50s, and then Saturday morning, dew points come up a little bit on Saturday, but I think even Saturday should be okay. Sunday, I think, will be the first day where we'll start to see the dew points come up a bit.
Two spectacular days, Thursday and Friday, and this may change in my mind, or we'll be watching this, but for those people who are saying to themselves, okay, then how's the weekend look? Saturday, I hate to say this right now, it crossed my mind that Saturday may actually start out rather cloudy, and the reason why I'm saying that is that return flow of increasingly warm to eventually hot and humid weather.
Well, there you
which
see it there. There'll probably be some high clouds, maybe.
Well, high clouds or maybe even some mid and low-level clouds initially on Saturday. People look out the window.
It's a little
on Saturday
onshore-ish there Friday night and Saturday.
People say making the plan. All right, we're going to go to the beach, and you wake up on Saturday morning. What the heck is this?
Well, particularly this time of year too, Joe, because the nights are getting longer and longer, and
Right.
there has been a significant. You get those longer nights. You get into the late August and September. You get the low clouds that start to gather. So you do have, there is a bit of it's an onshore-ish. I'll call it an onshore-ish flow going into Saturday. Doesn't look, like we're going to get too much in the way of active weather, other than maybe, and I don't even see anything until we get to maybe the latter part of next week.
Yeah.
But we're going to have this upper high off the East Coast and the
pump.
ridge, so we're going to get the, the humidity's going to come back, or as I've been, openly expressing the fact it's the bad hair weather is going to be in force again next week. And looking longer term, just to look at the upper air, just real fast, you got this deep trough here in the east, so that brings down this break in the humidity, and then the ridge builds. It's kind of an east-west upper high. It's not really pushing itself all the way up into Canada, but the trough wants to go at least later next week into the west. So this could be maybe a one last gasp that lasts for a little while.
Yeah.
I also don't think that, it doesn't appear to me, since we've gone through a summer here where many areas have had a relatively tougher time getting to 90 than what we've seen in some other summers, that, it's going to get very warm to hot, but I don't see it getting, just like the last couple of times, I don't see it getting crazy hot. And
Crazy hot being what, 95?
95,
Yeah.
There have been heat waves, the longest heat wave on record in New York City, Central Park, is actually a late August, early September heat wave. And, all the highs in that heat wave were in the middle, mostly middle and a few upper 90s. I don't know that we're going to be seeing that. And, there's also, in a situation like that, when you have a ridge in that position, sometimes you get these back doors that show up that you don't see at the moment.
But for people who are looking ahead already to it's Tuesday, but you're thinking about the weekend and hearing how spectacular Thursday and Friday are going to be, I'm just saying right now that in my thoughts, that for the upcoming weekend, if you want to go to the beach or you want to plan something out of doors and you want a lot of sunshine, it's looking, to me at least, that Sunday might be the sunnier of the 2 weekend days, because we're going to make that transition on Saturday, subtle as it is, from the lovely weather of Thursday and Friday into the increasing heat and humidity for Sunday and early next week. Saturday is the day when we make that transition, and I'm just looking at maybe the possibility of more clouds than a lot of people would like to see on Saturday.
We do have some folks from Hawaii. Kathy, please forgive me if I don't pronounce your name correctly. Paiaina. Aloha. We are finishing a how would you say?
Kauai
Nut harvest bananas. I don't know they might take out the walls. They're twice as high as my house. Still trying to decide what to do about the bananas. Yeah, that's a big industry in Hawaii.
Well, that and
pineapple.
Yeah. You ever go to Hawaii? Go to the Dole factory. That's one of the big tourist attractions in Hawaii. Is the Dole pineapple factory.
Kato in Hawaii, who's been on the last few days. Welcome back this evening. We live off grid, have a generator and catchment water. We hope for the best for all of us on the islands. Fingers crossed, that this winds up hopefully weakening significantly before it gets out your way. Let's see. I'm just trying to get through some of the comments. And by the way, a general welcome to everybody here tonight, as always.
And I would have to say, and I don't want to inject anything political into this, but this Hawaii is, after all, one of our 50 states. And this looks like they're bordering right now on a major, significant situation for them from a weather standpoint. Mm-hmm. And, you hardly have heard anything about Hawaii. Unfortunately, political events in recent days and even recent hours seem to be eclipsing what looks to be a real tough situation for one of our 50 states.
Jamie Cook, thank you for paying attention from East Maui. Thank you. We've been doing, I've been at this for days, so and we're certainly going to be talking about this for tomorrow. Landslides, Fight the Good Fight points out, it brings up a good point. This would be a situation where landslides would be an issue.
Right. Well, depending upon your topography, I'm not sure about big cities like Hawaii, for example, but on the Big Island, I'm sure that especially would come into play, or even some of the smaller islands. Aniki in 1992 almost devastated Kauai, which is
And that came up from the south. That actually developed in the Central Pacific zone, which is west of 140 degrees west, and it developed, if I remember correctly, southwest of Hawaii, and then just as it got to a Category 4, and just flew northeastward from there, and that was the last time. That's the last direct hit that Hawaii has seen. Now, Anthony, this might be before that 936 millibars. Hurricane Lane, the second most intense hurricane in the Northeast Pacific, out to 180 for this season, behind Hector at 936. But now on the last pass that we saw from the recon, 936 is the same pressure here on Lane. So they're tied for first. Yeah. And I think that this this they may have to nudge this up to a Category 5. I'm thinking.
It's funny. This is almost like the summertime equivalent of what the Boston area looked at during the winter of 1978. The storm of January 21st, 1978 was the biggest snowstorm that ever hit the Boston area and their Boston weather records. And they figure, okay, well, that's set in stone for a while. And what happened 2 weeks later? Bang! They had the great blizzard of 78, which eclipsed all those snowfall records. And now, here we are. We're looking at a storm that 2 weeks ago was very potent, was a record breaker, and you figure yourself, okay, well, they're not going to see something like that for a while. And here we are 2 weeks later, and now we have Lane with the potential of breaking records from that stood for only a couple of weeks.
Yeah, this is a little overwhelming, actually. As I said earlier, this is a very big learning experience for both of us, because we just don't see this sort of stuff very often. Hey, Jason Schaefer, I know you mentioned about the GFS being useless. I don't think the GFS has been particularly useless at all with this hurricane. It was the first to go to the right when the others weren't. Now all the models seem to have come in that direction. And I also think, when it's showing that weakening, I think what it's telling you two things. It's telling you that the mountainous terrain is going to impact the circulation to some degree, and also the models are picking up on that wind shear, and that is going to be key to whether the intensity of this storm, whether it holds onto it for a longer period of time. Certainly, you got to think, Joe, with that Category 5 hurricane, let's borderline 4, 5, from where it is now. Let's lay the land impacts aside for the moment, but the ocean impacts with the waves, I mean, they got to be out of control.
Yeah, that's you mentioned that earlier. It's something, and Hawaii, the Big Island of Hawaii, I guess. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, and I don't have specific numbers in front of me, but the Big Island is probably, about half the size of Haiti? Geographically?
Yeah.
Now, Haiti, of course, we often look at that for whenever a hurricane passes through Haiti. They have very, very high mountains or whatever, and certainly 14,000-foot volcanic cones would do the same thing to a tropical cyclone so far as Hawaii is concerned, but they're only half the size, I think, of that Haiti is, or that area. So,
all right, one more look, Joe. I'm going to just give one more look to see if that fourth pass, probably not almost there.
Yeah.
But just bring it up really fast, as we're going to have to go soon, folks. Here, but this is the Hurricane Hunter is making a fourth pass now. So probably it's coming up on 6:40 Eastern time. So probably at some point in the next hour or so, we'll have another pressure. So we'll see if this if we wind up with something even more intense than what we have at the moment. 936 millibars. The official advisory: 155 mile an hour winds, and Hurricane Lane going to be making its turn probably in the next 24 hours. All right, we got to wrap it up here, folks. Thanks very much for being here. Joe and Joe Weather Show comes back tonight on Facebook. So we'll be back on tonight at roughly 9:15 Eastern time ish. and we'll go through all of this again, and we'll see what's new, and we'll pass that information along to you, and we'll discuss it and see if we can figure this out a bit more.
It's conceivable that on the Facebook show we'll have at least some sort of intermediate advisory on.
Right, we'll have the new intermediate advisory, which would be the, I believe, the time change is killing me. So they just came out. Was it the 11 a.m. advisory
For Hawaii time?
for Hawaii? Let me just.
Well, again, they're 6 hours behind us. They're 6 hours behind
Right,
during
so-
the summer and 5 hours during the winter because Hawaii does not observe daylight saving time.
Right, so this is the 11 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time advisory. So the next one will be the 2 p.m. Intermediate advisory. So we'll have that for the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which will be on Facebook at 9:15. And for those of you on YouTube, if those of you who aren't on Facebook, what I'll always do is usually after we're done with the Joe and Joe Show, I upload the show onto YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it out of the video library. So thanks very much for being here tonight. We will be back a bit later, as we said, and of course there'll be live streams coming tomorrow right here on my YouTube channel. We'll see you later.
Okay.